Well, I think these multi-tiered structures have been traditionally viewed with some skepticism. I think Cape Vin, whilst being effective, was operating at about a 14 to 15% discount to its underlying asset, which was really Distell. And of course, investors and shareholders were looking for a single point and an easier point of entry directly into Distell rather than through Cape Vin. So this is the culmination of the request of many of our shareholders to remove the multi-tiered structure.
What opportunities will this relisting present for Distell?
Well, with the single point of entry into Distell, our free float now doubles from 19.5% to 37.5%. And we think as a result of that, there will be higher liquidity in our share. And then, of course, we're hoping that will have a beneficial impact on our share price. Tracker funds, like the Zwix, will also be more interested and will be monitoring and following our share, and that will also have a beneficial effect on the business. And then lastly, for us as management and for our board and our shareholders, the ability and the optionality to pursue our growth agenda through a single entity, Distell Group Holdings, will also be a little easier and more flexible.
I'm glad you bring up the growth agenda and just a sense of the amount of capital that you're going to be seeing from this development, and really where you're going to be looking to invest that capital.
Well, firstly, I wouldn't like to comment on the size of any of the potential opportunities that we're looking at or look to pursue, because they all vary. Of course, we focused on the African continent. Our primary growth frontier, in our opinion, is in Africa. And we focused on 4 or 5 priority markets across the continent: Nigeria, Angola, East Africa and Kenya, closer to home, Zambia and Mozambique, being specific markets that we're interested in.
I'm interested in countries like Nigeria and the alcohol demand in those regions. What are you seeing in terms of trends and demand there?
Well, look, I think that the oil-rich economies like Nigeria and Angola are coming back after a period of probably difficult times as a result of a drop in the oil price. Oil prices, as we've seen, are starting to recover, and we're starting to see a slow recovery in both of those markets. So, of course, that does bode well for a company such as ours in those markets. And then closer to home for our business, a wines, cider and spirits business, these particular categories are underrepresented in Africa, and we see massive potential for growth as incomes grow and as communities and populations urbanize in those countries.
The wines business, South Africa, actually Southern Africa, has seen a vast amount of drought, and I just want to get an outlook from you in terms of how you'll be dealing with these weather conditions going forward.
Yeah, so good question. I think firstly we see a climatic change as the new norm. So we are, together with our farmers, who I must compliment, have been innovative in firstly addressing our use of water. For example, at Distell, our water use has dropped by almost 50% in the last 3 years, and we'll see that continuing. Then secondly, our farmers, of course, are applying much more innovative practices in their vineyards to ensure their yields and the quality of their fruit goes up whilst not being used to the same amounts of water. This last year, we did see the overall crop come down by about 15%. So we will see some pressure on prices to the consumer. At the same time, there's going to be a rebalancing of prices to the farmer, which is long overdue, because we need those farmers to be viable and sustainable in the long term, which is a goal that we committed to as South Africa's leading wine producer.
And on the point that you bring up, the consumer, are you confident of their buying power given their constrained pockets and really a very slowly growing economy?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge. I think in the short term we might face some headwinds, but the overall demand for wine is increasing across many of the urban communities of South Africa and in fact in Africa. So I would look at the long term and suggest that wine is going to be an increasing part of consumers' choice going forward, and that this is really a temporary blip whilst the market itself rebases to a new norm with climate change.
And then finally, you've mentioned part of the group strategy is to look for opportunities and also grow its base here in South Africa. What other elements of that strategy will you be presenting, I guess, to investors?
Yeah, well, I think here in South Africa over the last 3 years, we've invested significantly in increased sales force coverage of our marketplace, wider distribution of our brands, and we are investing aggressively in the differentiation and the innovation of our brands. You can expect those initiatives to continue. At the same time, we have started a journey of focusing our portfolio and our product offering, and with that, I think you're going to see a much leaner and more focused production and portfolio lineup in Distell, which I think is going to bode well for the financial performance of our business in the medium term.